I still remember the look on Sarah's face when she told me I wasn't welcome at the table this Mother's Day. It wasn't even a conversation, more of a decree. I'd spent the entire morning making sure everything was perfect. The flowers were arranged just right, the table set with the best china I could find, and the meal prepared with all my love, just like every year. But this time, it was different. I felt something in the air, an uncomfortable tension that I couldn't shake. As I placed the last dish on the table, I thought this would be the year they'd finally see me, acknowledge me, even if just for one day. But instead, as the family gathered around, Sarah's voice cut through the room like a cold gust of wind. She looked me in the eyes and said, "Mom, you need to leave the table. The real gift today isn't for you." I froze. It was like the ground beneath me had vanished. I stared at her, trying to process what I had just heard. Her words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. There was no anger in her tone, no rage. It was calm, almost too calm, like she was delivering bad news without a care. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. Surely, this wasn't happening. But as the seconds ticked by, the realization sank in. This was real. Sarah had just excluded me from my own family's celebration, as if I didn't matter. I sat there, the weight of her words settling in, and I felt a deep, hollow ache in my chest. I was no longer the mother, the matriarch of this family. To Sarah, I was nothing but a burden. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My voice caught in my throat, and I could only sit there, stunned and silent. My mind raced back to all those years I had spent raising my son, the sacrifices I'd made, the love I had poured into this family, and here I was, being told I didn't belong. As Sarah turned her back to me and began to take her seat at the head of the table, I couldn't help but wonder, how did we get here? How did the woman I welcomed into my home, into my family, become someone capable of doing this to me? I could feel the eyes of my son, watching, waiting for my reaction. But he said nothing. Nothing at all. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I held myself together. This wasn't the time for outbursts. No, this was a game, a cruel game, and I wasn't about to play by their rules. I stood up slowly, not looking at anyone, and walked out of the room. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to plead. I had been cast aside, and I would leave without a word. But as I stepped out, I couldn't help but wonder, what was I going to do next? As I stepped out of the dining room, the weight of Sarah's words still lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. My feet moved slowly, almost as if my body was in shock. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had spent so many years building this family, pouring everything I had into raising my son, supporting him through thick and thin. And now, in a moment, it was all falling apart. I walked down the hallway, feeling the coldness of the house around me. The walls that had once felt like a sanctuary now seemed foreign, alien. I had always been the heart of this home, the one who kept everything together, the one who made it feel warm, inviting. But now, I was nothing. I reached the door to my bedroom and stopped. My hands shook as I grasped the doorknob, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. I just stood there, staring at the door, the silence pressing in from every side. I had always thought of my family as a safe place, a refuge from the world. But now, it felt like the place that had once been my refuge had turned against me. I thought about calling my son, trying to talk to him, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. He hadn't said a word during all of this, just watched. He was complicit, just as much as Sarah was. My heart sank as I realized the truth. I had been pushed aside. I had been discarded. And they didn't even care enough to hide it. I took a deep breath and opened the door to my room. The room was still the same, filled with memories of better times. My husband's side of the bed was empty, but his presence was still there, lingering in the space. I walked over to the dresser, my fingers brushing lightly over the surface. It was all too much. The memories, the pain, the betrayal. I had to get away, clear my mind. But first, I needed to make a decision. The truth had become painfully clear. I could no longer be a passive participant in this family. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. But what could I do? What would happen next? The answers weren't easy, but they had to come. I wasn't going to let Sarah's cruelty define me, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let my son's indifference take away my dignity. I looked out the window, the evening sky turning dark, and I made up my mind. I would no longer be silent. I would make them see me. I would find my way back to the life I had once known, the life I deserved. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only option left. I would stand up for myself, no matter what. The next few days felt like I was walking through a fog, each step heavier than the last. I didn't speak much, keeping to myself, avoiding the calls and messages from my son and Sarah. I knew they wanted to apologize, but I couldn't bring myself to pick up the phone. How could they pretend like nothing happened? How could they act like I didn't matter? I sat alone in my living room, the silence now deafening. The once warm and familiar space now felt cold, like it was no longer mine. The walls that had once held memories of family gatherings and laughter now seemed hollow. I had spent decades of my life nurturing this family, but what had it come to? Nothing. I wasn't just ignored, I was erased. I had thought about packing up and leaving, finding somewhere else to go, somewhere I could start fresh, but the idea felt like I would be giving up, like I was letting them win. I wasn't ready to let them win. I needed to make them see what they had done to me, but I wasn't sure how. I had no plan, just a deep need for something to change. I knew I couldn't keep waiting for them to come around, and I couldn't keep pretending. Everything was fine. As the days passed, I started to find small ways to regain some control. I rearranged the furniture in my living room, changing the space that had once felt so stifling. I began to spend more time outside, taking long walks around the neighborhood, trying to clear my mind. With each step I took, I began to feel a small spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. I started to remember who I was before all of this, before my son and Sarah had turned their backs on me. I was strong. I had survived so much in my life, and I wasn't about to let this be the thing that broke me. One evening, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, the old family photo albums spread out before me. I traced my finger over the pictures, remembering the good times. I remembered the woman I had been, confident, proud, unafraid. I had raised my son, loved my family, and built a life for us all. I could still be that woman. I didn't need their approval to be strong. I didn't need their validation to know that I had worth. I closed the album, took a deep breath, and stood up. It was time. I had to take the next step, not for them, but for myself. I would no longer let their actions define me. It was time to take control of my life again. I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The pain from that day, from Sarah's cold words, still sat like a stone in my chest. I couldn't ignore it anymore, but I wasn't sure where to go from here. It felt like I had been walking through life, trying to keep my head above water, but now I was drowning in the weight of everything. My son had gone silent, as had Sarah. They acted like they were in control, like nothing had happened, but I knew better. They had crossed a line. It wasn't just about the seat at the table, or the harsh words Sarah had spoken, it was about the way they saw me, the way they took my presence for granted. I had given so much, but it was never enough. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly trying to prove my worth to them. I had to prove it to myself first. That night, I sat in the living room, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I thought about the future. What did I want? Where did I go from here? I had no answers yet, but I knew I needed to find them. As I stared at the empty chair across from me, I realized something important. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. I had spent my life giving and giving, hoping for something in return, but now it was time to take back control. I didn't need to beg for their love or validation. I was worthy of respect, just as I was. The next morning, I started taking small steps. I called an old friend from out of town, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. We talked for hours, reminiscing about the past and catching up on the years that had slipped by. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. I felt like I wasn't invisible, like someone actually cared. That was the first step, remembering who I was before all the hurt, before all the disappointment. I started doing the things I loved again, things that made me happy. I took up gardening again, something I hadn't done in years. The smell of the soil, the feel of the earth between my fingers, it grounded me. It reminded me that I could still find peace, even in the midst of all this chaos. I started taking better care of myself, physically and mentally. I went for walks, read books I'd been putting off, and slowly, day by day, I felt stronger. I knew I wasn't going to fix everything overnight, but I had made the decision to fight for myself. No more living in the shadow of their neglect. I was going to make my life my own again. I had made progress, but there was still something missing, something I couldn't ignore. As I spent more time rediscovering myself, I realized that I needed to stop looking for validation from the people who had let me down. But the emptiness I felt in the pit of my stomach didn't go away just because I started to rebuild. I still had unfinished business with Sarah, and I knew that. She had wounded me deeply, but I wasn't going to let that define me. I had taken my first steps toward healing, but part of me still needed closure. The silence between us had been deafening, and I knew that silence was her way of trying to control the situation. I had always been the one to keep the peace, to smooth things over, but now it was time to do things differently. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about getting back at her. It was about reclaiming my own voice, my dignity. One afternoon, I called Sarah. The phone rang a few times before she answered. Her voice on the other end was guarded, but I could sense the tension. "Martha," she asked, her tone unsure. "Yes, it's me," I said, my voice steady. "I think it's time we talk." There was a long pause, and I knew she was weighing her options. But I wasn't backing down this time. I needed to hear her side, to understand why she did what she did. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't think you'd call," she said, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Well, I did," I replied, "and I think it's time for us to have an honest conversation." The words felt heavy between us, and for a moment, I wasn't sure how it would go. But I knew it was a conversation that had to happen. "Sarah," I began, "I need to understand. Why did you treat me the way you did? What happened to the family we once were?" I could hear her take a breath, and then she spoke again. "I didn't want it to come to this," she said quietly. "But it's always been about you taking over. I never felt like I was good enough for your family." Her words were raw, vulnerable, and I could feel the tension in her voice. "It wasn't about taking over, Sarah," I said, my tone softening. "It was about being part of this family, supporting one another. I never meant to make you feel like you weren't enough." There was another long pause before she spoke again. "I've been selfish," she admitted. "I see that now." Her confession caught me off guard, but in a way, it gave me the closure I had been looking for. "We all make mistakes, Sarah," I said quietly. "But it's how we move forward that matters." I paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. "I'm not angry anymore, but I want us to find a way to rebuild this relationship, if you're willing." The silence on the other end of the line was long, but when she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "I'd like that, Martha. I think we both need to try." It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I wasn't just rebuilding my life, I was rebuilding my relationships. Slowly, but surely, I was finding my way back to a life where I could stand tall, knowing that I had fought for myself and my family. And that was all that mattered. The days after that conversation with Sarah were quieter, but they weren't easy. I had taken a step toward healing, but healing wasn't something that happened overnight. It was more like a slow, steady climb, one where you sometimes felt like you were slipping backward. I kept reminding myself that it would take time. As much as I had wanted things to go back to the way they were, I knew that wasn't realistic. The hurt was still there, sitting in the corners of my mind, waiting to surface when I least expected it. But with every day that passed, I felt a little stronger, a little more like the woman I used to be. I began taking small steps to rebuild my life, and that meant stepping outside of my comfort zone. I reconnected with old friends, people I hadn't seen in years. One afternoon, I met up with Claire, an old colleague from my early career days. She was kind and full of energy, and we spent the afternoon laughing over coffee, reminiscing about the past. It felt good to talk to someone who hadn't been a part of my family drama, someone who could just listen without judgment. After that, I started to spend more time focusing on myself. I took up painting, something I had always wanted to try but never had the time for. It was relaxing, and the colors and shapes gave me a sense of control that I hadn't felt in a long time. My days slowly started to feel more fulfilling, and I could sense a shift in my mindset. I wasn't just moving through life anymore, I was living it again. At the same time, I continued to make progress with Sarah. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I wanted to retreat back into my shell. But I remembered what I had learned. This wasn't just about forgiving others, it was about forgiving myself. I had carried so much anger for so long, and it had eaten away at me. I realized that I couldn't move forward if I didn't let go of the past. One evening, as I was sitting on the porch with a glass of iced tea, my phone rang. It was my son, Ben. I hadn't spoken to him in days, and I could tell by the tone of his voice that he wanted to say something important. "Mom, I've been thinking," he started, his voice hesitant. "I know I've been distant, and I want to apologize for not being there when you needed me." His words surprised me. I had expected him to stay quiet, to let time heal things, but instead, he was reaching out. "It's okay, Ben," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know you've had a lot on your plate." "No," he replied, his voice firm. "It's not okay. I should have been there for you. I didn't understand how much you were going through, and I'm sorry." I paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. This was what I had been waiting for, acknowledgement. It wasn't about the apology itself, it was about the realization that my son saw me, that he understood the pain I had endured. "I appreciate that, Ben," I said quietly. "And I think we both need to do better. Not just for the family, but for ourselves." It wasn't a perfect conversation, but it was a start. I could hear the sincerity in his voice, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was hope for our relationship. That evening, as I sat in my quiet house, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't in a long time, peace. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but I knew that I had taken the first step toward healing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own future. I had spent the past few weeks finding my footing again, learning to breathe without the constant weight of betrayal on my chest. It wasn't easy, but I was making progress. The healing had begun, though it was more like mending broken glass, slow and careful, with moments of sharp pain as old wounds reopened. But I wasn't going to let them win. I had made peace with myself and with Sarah, but there was still more to do. The space I had once filled with anger and regret was now occupied by something new. I had become more aware of the little things that made me happy. The scent of fresh flowers in the garden, the quiet mornings with a cup of coffee, the feeling of my hands in the soil as I tended to the plants. These were the things that had always brought me comfort, and now, they felt like the foundation I was rebuilding my life on. Sarah and I had exchanged a few more messages, and while things weren't perfect, there was a sense of understanding between us. It wasn't the closeness we once had, but it was progress. I no longer felt the need to prove anything to her. I was no longer fighting for her approval. I was fighting for my own peace. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, reflecting on how far I had come, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had spent so many years living for everyone else, making sure the family was happy, making sure my son was taken care of. But now, I was learning to live for myself. The realization was both freeing and terrifying. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that I was going to be okay. I had to trust in myself. The phone rang, and I glanced at the screen. It was Ben. I hadn't heard from him in a few days, and I wasn't sure what to expect. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice warm but tentative. "I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I want to do better. I want to be there for you." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, and for the first time, I didn't feel the anger or resentment that had been so prevalent before. "I appreciate that, Ben," I said softly. "It means a lot to me." There was a pause on the other end, and then he spoke again, his tone a little more confident. "I know it's been hard, and I don't want to make the same mistakes. I want us to be a family again." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I held it back. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when my son acknowledged my pain and was willing to make amends. "I want that too," I replied, my voice steady. "But it's going to take time. We all have our own healing to do." He agreed, and we spoke for a while longer, discussing plans for the future and the steps we could take to rebuild our relationship. As the conversation ended, I felt a sense of hope I hadn't felt in years. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew that I wasn't alone. My family was still my family, and with time, we could find our way back to each other. For the first time in a long time, I could see a future where we weren't just a family by name, but a family in spirit, with trust, love, and respect at the foundation. And that was something worth fighting for. As the weeks went by, I found myself in a new rhythm, a new routine. My mornings started slow, with the sun creeping through the curtains, and a cup of coffee in my hands. I didn't rush anymore. I took my time, savoring the small things that made each day feel meaningful. I had learned to appreciate the quiet moments, the moments I had once overlooked in the chaos of life. I spent more time in the garden, tending to the flowers that had always brought me peace. It wasn't just the plants I was nurturing, it was my soul. Each bloom that I carefully tended reminded me that growth, like healing, took time. It wasn't always instant, but with patience, it was possible. Sarah had started reaching out more, cautiously at first, as if she wasn't sure how to bridge the gap that had grown between us. But each time, her words felt more genuine. I could hear the remorse in her voice, and it was clear that she was trying. It wasn't easy for her. It wasn't easy for me either. But I knew that we had both made mistakes, and now, we were trying to fix them. It wasn't about forgiveness just for the sake of it, it was about moving forward, together. There was no rush. We didn't need to fix everything at once. One day, Sarah invited me over for lunch. It was a simple gesture, but it meant a lot. When I walked into her house, there was an unfamiliar feeling in the air, one of warmth, not tension. Sarah greeted me with a soft smile, and for the first time in a long time, I felt welcomed. She had set the table with a meal she had prepared herself, and there was something in her eyes that told me this wasn't just a meal, it was an offering. A way of showing that she cared. We ate together, talking about the past, but more importantly, about the future. It felt different, like the walls between us had started to come down. We weren't just mother and daughter-in-law anymore. We were two people who had both been hurt, but who were learning to heal, step by step. By the time lunch was over, I realized that I wasn't just mending my relationship with Sarah, I was mending myself. I had spent so many years giving to others, sacrificing my own needs for the sake of family. But now, I was learning to take care of myself, to put my own well-being first. It wasn't selfish, it was necessary. I wasn't going to let my worth be defined by anyone else's actions or opinions. I had value, just as I was. That afternoon, I walked back to my house with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The journey wasn't over, but I had made progress. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. I was no longer just surviving, I was living. And that was enough. The weeks continued to pass, and life began to settle into a rhythm that felt almost normal again. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had control over my own life. The healing wasn't instant, but I had come a long way from the woman who had once felt discarded, forgotten. I had learned that sometimes, you have to step back to move forward. I spent my days enjoying the little things, the simple pleasures that I had once taken for granted. I was no longer defined by the expectations of others. I was taking care of myself, learning to say no when necessary, and rediscovering the things that brought me joy. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, I realized how far I had come. My house, once filled with tension and silence, now felt like home again. The love and care I had poured into it over the years were still present, but now, it wasn't just a place for others, it was a place for me. Sarah and I had been talking more regularly. Our conversations weren't always easy, but they were honest. There were moments when the old wounds threatened to surface, but we both recognized that healing was a process. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about building a future based on respect and understanding. One day, as we spoke on the phone, Sarah said something that stayed with me. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she said, her voice soft. "And I realized that I took you for granted. I'm sorry for that. I never really understood how much you did for this family until now." I could feel the sincerity in her words, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry. I felt grateful. Grateful for the chance to rebuild, for the opportunity to move forward, and for the reminder that people could change. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. "It's not easy to admit when we're wrong. But it's the first step to making things right." The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was understanding. It felt like we were finally on the same page, no longer trapped in the past, but looking forward to a future that was still uncertain, but full of possibility. Later that week, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Ben. I hadn't expected anything from him, especially not in writing. But as I opened the envelope and read his words, I felt a lump form in my throat. "Mom, I know things have been hard. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I just want you to know that I love you. I'm sorry for the way I've treated you, and I hope that we can find a way to rebuild what we once had." His words were simple, but they carried so much weight. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them until that moment. I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me. This wasn't the end of the journey, it was just the beginning of something new. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew that I was no longer walking alone. I had my family, and most importantly, I had myself. I had learned to stand up for what I needed, and I had learned that love wasn't something you earned through sacrifice, it was something you gave, freely and without expectations. And in that moment, I realized that I had everything I needed to move forward, no matter what came next. In this emotional journey of family stories, a woman faces the betrayal of her daughter-in-law and son, learning the painful truth about the family she dedicated her life to. The betrayal leaves her heartbroken, but as she heals, she finds solace in rediscovering herself. The family stories continue as she navigates the ups and downs of reconnecting with her loved ones, particularly her daughter-in-law, who comes to terms with her past mistakes. The reconciliation process is slow but meaningful, allowing the woman to regain her strength and dignity. Through her journey, she learns to live for herself, finding peace in the little things and taking control of her future. These family stories unfold with the characters facing deep emotional conflicts, but they also reveal the power of growth, forgiveness, and the importance of family connections. The healing journey continues, showing that even after betrayal, it's possible to rebuild relationships and regain one's sense of worth. In the end, these family stories remind us that no matter how fractured relationships may seem, with time, effort, and understanding, healing is always possible. Create a realistic portrait of an older woman aged around 65. She has white skin and wears a simple elegant outfit appropriate for her age. The perspective should be straight on. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. She has soft, natural features and a calm expression. Create a realistic portrait of a woman in her early 40s with white skin. She wears a modern, stylish outfit suitable for her age. The perspective should be straight on. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Her expression is confident with a slight hint of seriousness. 1. The scene opens in a dimly lit living room. Both main characters are standing across from each other, the air thick with tension. The older woman, having just been betrayed by her daughter-in-law, stands her ground, her expression a mix of hurt and determination. The younger woman, facing her, looks defensive but hesitant, as if unsure whether to apologize or keep her pride. Their voices are sharp, words cutting through the silence. The confrontation escalates as the younger woman tries to justify her actions, but the older woman stands tall, refusing to back down. The space between them seems to close, the heat of their words and emotions filling the room, creating a charged atmosphere that makes the viewer feel the weight of their unresolved conflict. 2. The older woman is seen in the early morning light, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee in hand. The camera focuses on her soft, tired expression as she gazes out the window, contemplating the challenges of the day ahead. She's dressed simply, wearing a light sweater and cozy slippers, a stark contrast to the emotional intensity of the previous scene. She's alone, but there's a sense of peace in the stillness around her. The camera lingers on her hands as she slowly stirs her coffee, the sound of the spoon clinking against the mug breaking the silence, reminding us that even in solitude, she finds moments of quiet strength. 3. The younger woman is shown getting ready for the day, standing in front of a mirror, carefully applying makeup. She's dressed in a modern, professional outfit, and the camera catches her adjusting her appearance, her face a mask of composure and confidence. As she examines herself, there's a flicker of something beneath the surface, doubt, perhaps, or regret, but she quickly brushes it aside, focusing on the image in the mirror. The scene is fast-paced, capturing her morning routine with precision, suggesting that she's putting on a facade for the world, hiding her internal conflict behind a polished exterior. 4. In a dramatic scene, both main characters are in the same room. But this time the tension is directed outward. They're facing a third party, an antagonist who has been manipulating situations behind the scenes. The camera captures the older woman and younger woman in close-up shots, their faces filled with anger and realization as they confront the truth. The antagonist, standing between them, seems unfazed, but the emotional weight of the confrontation is palpable. Their shared frustration is visible, though the older woman remains resolute while the younger one appears shaken. It's a moment of reckoning for both women as they slowly begin to understand the extent of the deception they've both been subjected to. 5. The older woman is seen walking through a garden, her hands gently caressing the leaves of a plant. The camera focuses on her serene expression, the calmness of the scene contrasting sharply with the chaos of the earlier confrontations. She's alone, but there's a sense of purpose in her stride, a feeling that she's found her peace despite everything that's happened. The sunlight filters through the trees, casting soft shadows on her face, and for a moment, the viewer is reminded of her inner strength, the quiet power that comes from taking control of her own narrative. 6. The final scene shows the older woman and younger woman sitting together, no words exchanged but a mutual understanding in the air. The camera captures a soft moment of reconciliation, no grand gestures, just two people acknowledging the pain they've caused each other and, perhaps, a tentative hope for the future. The room around them is calm and cozy, with warm lighting reflecting the mood of the scene. It's not the perfect resolution, but it's a beginning, two women, no longer adversaries, but two people learning to coexist, understanding the value of forgiveness and time. 1. A dramatic, intense scene inside a dimly lit living room. The older woman, character 1, stands firm, facing her daughter-in-law, character 2. The air is thick with tension, as both women stand across from each other. The older woman, with a look of hurt mixed with determination, stares straight into the younger woman's eyes, refusing to back down. Her posture is strong, but her emotions are raw, and her expression shows the pain of betrayal. The younger woman, defensive, with a mixture of guilt and frustration, appears unsure of how to respond, her face showing tension as her body language speaks of her internal struggle. Both women are in their everyday clothes, but their expressions and the charged atmosphere in the room make this a powerful confrontation. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. The light in the room casts shadows on their faces, adding to the somber tone. The older woman speaks softly but firmly, her voice cutting through the silence, while the younger woman remains silent for a moment, then tries to explain, her voice wavering with unease. This is a confrontation that will change both of their lives. 1, 2, 2. A serene, quiet scene inside the older woman's, character 1, home. She's sitting at a wooden kitchen table, holding a mug of coffee. Her expression is calm but distant, her tired eyes reflecting the weight of the past. The sunlight shines through the window, bathing the room in soft, warm tones. She wears a simple sweater and slippers, embodying comfort and solitude. Her hands are resting on the table, holding the cup delicately, as she gazes out the window with a reflective, introspective look. There's a sense of peace here, a quiet contrast to the emotional turmoil she has been through. The silence is broken only by the sound of her stirring her coffee, the soft clink of the spoon. This scene speaks of her strength and the calm she is starting to find within herself, despite the hurt she has endured. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 3. A fast-paced scene where the younger woman, character 2, is getting ready in front of a mirror. She's adjusting her hair, putting on makeup, and checking her appearance carefully. Her expression is focused, almost clinical, as she perfects every detail. The lighting is bright and crisp, reflecting her polished and controlled persona. She's dressed in a modern, professional outfit, ready to face the world. However, as she examines herself, her eyes betray a flicker of something deeper, doubt or insecurity. She quickly masks it with a confident smile, as if trying to convince herself of the image she's projecting. The quick cuts between her adjusting her clothes, applying makeup, and looking in the mirror show her preparing to face whatever comes, hiding the vulnerability underneath. The entire scene has an air of emotional conflict, as the viewer can sense the pressure she's under. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 2, 4. A tense confrontation involving the older woman, character 1, the younger woman, character 2, and an antagonist. The three are in the same room, standing face to face in a charged atmosphere. The older woman and the younger woman stand side by side, both visibly frustrated and angry. They are confronting the antagonist, who stands in front of them, unbothered and calm. The lighting is dark, creating shadows that emphasize the gravity of the moment. The older woman is resolute, her body language showing strength, while the younger woman appears to be caught between guilt and anger. The antagonist stands between them, looking unfazed by the emotional storm around them. The scene conveys a pivotal moment of truth where both women begin to understand the extent of the manipulation and lies they've been subjected to. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2, 5. The older woman, character 1, is seen in a peaceful outdoor setting, walking through her garden. The camera captures her softly touching the plants, her face relaxed and calm. She's wearing casual, comfortable clothing, fitting the peaceful, serene atmosphere around her. The sunlight filters through the trees, creating a warm glow around her. As she walks, there's a gentle breeze, and she closes her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. The camera focuses on her face as she smiles slightly, appreciating the quiet beauty around her. The scene radiates tranquility, showing that she has found some semblance of peace and control over her life. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 6. The final scene shows both women, the older woman, character 1, and the younger woman, character 2, sitting together in a peaceful room. The lighting is soft, and the atmosphere is calm. There's no need for words, the silence between them speaks volumes. They sit side by side, a slight distance between them, both reflecting on the journey they've been through. The older woman's face is serene, with a soft smile, while the younger woman looks at her with a mixture of remorse and understanding. They are no longer adversaries but two people who have acknowledged their past mistakes. The camera slowly pulls back, leaving them in a quiet moment of connection and tentative hope for the future. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2.